hi everyone. For those of you who don't know me yet, I'm Pamela Jouven. I'm the director of the SME Climate Hub, and it is my pleasure to welcome you today for this webinar. And of course, thank you not only for being here, but also for stepping up to build more sustainable businesses. Now, during today's conversation, we'll be discussing a number of things. We'll be looking at the free tools and resources that are available for our community of small and medium-sized businesses. This week, as some of you might have seen, we launched our new action space, which really simplifies business climate action through tools that help you understand and reduce your emissions. We will also hear from a small business that is part of our community and really leading the way on climate action. And of course, we'll take the time to answer your questions. So we really want to use this as a chance to dig into how we can best support you, we can best support your climate action journey and help you get the right tools in hand. So please interact with us. There is a Q&A feature in Zoom that is open. We'll have the time for an audience Q&A at the end of the session, so do submit your questions throughout the webinar. And now to start, I'll hand it over to Lydia Elliott, our Deputy Director of Supplier Decarbonization at the SME Climate Hub. She'll walk you through the basics of the SME Climate Hub and then dig into the action tools themselves. So over to you, Lydia.
Amazing. Thank you, Pamela. So welcome everyone. It's really great to see so many people on the line. And what I'm really going to do is give you a bit of an overview of the SME Climate Hub and talk you through some of our basics. So I'm going to start by focusing on why we want to focus on SMEs as part of the SME Climate Hub. And really, SMEs, small businesses, medium-sized businesses make up 90% of the businesses worldwide and employ over 2 billion people. A kind of a fundamental part of the business community. And sometimes in big climate conferences and climate work and climate action, small businesses get forgotten. And so we really want to bring the voice of small businesses, the challenges that small businesses face up into those formats. And also when we talk to all the small and medium-sized businesses that are part of our network, that have made our commitment, that are using our action tools, we get really clear shared barriers back across that community. So the need for policies or government-sponsored benefits, the need for more funding to enable smaller businesses to take climate action and to make some of the big actions that that they really want to take. So, and then there are lots of other kind of shared barriers, like a lack of data and data to the quality they want to get to, lacks of time and lack of knowledge about different elements of climate action. So we think that, because of this shared set of business challenges, we really have the ability to create commitments, content, action guides, all these different things to help support our community of SMEs in taking climate action. And one of the ways we think about that is in terms of what's the business case for climate action. So why should any small business be thinking about taking climate action? And that really, I think falls into kind of 4 categories. Growth. So when we talk to committed SMEs, we often hear particular things about why they're taking climate action. One of them is around growth, growing your business and brand, gaining a competitive advantage, getting more sales from a particular customer because you are taking the right climate actions. Another one is really around efficiency, so saving resources, be that energy or materials by working on waste. Another key kind of business case why SMEs are feeling that climate action makes business sense is around risk. So starting to manage the risks associated with climate change, and they come in lots of different forms. So that could be from regulation, incoming regulation risks, and that could be reporting, it could be other types of regulation like CBAM, all the way to actually thinking about the risks that climate change and the impacts of climate change happening are posing to businesses. And the fourth area is really around access to capital. So increasingly, we're seeing that there is more access to preferential rates for, say, a loan for SMEs if they are also doing the right green actions. So if you have the right commitment in place, you're taking the right actions to decrease your carbon emissions, then there is this beginning to be this access to increased capital to try and support that as an approach. So then the SME Climate Hub itself is intended to be a one-stop shop to help SMEs take climate action. And what that means is a place to commit to climate targets aligned with a 1.5 degree scenario, so aligned with where we want to move in terms of climate, to make sure that we protect our world. A place to access free best-in-class tools to measure emissions, act and report progress, and a place to benefit from incentives to reduce those emissions. And the SME Climate Hub itself is an initiative of the We Mean Business Coalition, where I come from, created in partnership with Exponential Roadmap Initiative and the UN Climate Change High-Level Champions Race to Zero campaign, which is a big campaign where lots of other actors, bigger businesses, financial institutions all join together trying to set a certain level of commitments. Now, I'm going to dig down a little into the commitment itself. So we have a commitment that's part of the SME Climate Hub. It links into this UN Race to Zero campaign. So as I said, it's a place where all sorts of organizations, it could be governments, businesses, cities, regions, universities, all are making these level of climate commitments. And this SME commitment is the route in for small and medium-sized businesses, a kind of free route into that UN Race to Zero campaign. The commitment itself is to halve greenhouse gas emissions before 2030, to achieve net zero emissions before 2050. And there's also options there to pick it being slightly earlier. So you can kind of choose 2030, 2040, 2050, depending on the level of ambition of your business. And then to disclose progress against that commitment on a yearly basis. So it's really aimed to be a very kind of simple commitment and to be one that's recognized in the same way that, a massive multinational company or a city would get their commitment recognized. One of the pieces of this I wanted to just spend a little bit more time on was the disclosing progress on a yearly basis through our reporting tool, because I think it's the most common question we get as we present this commitment is, what does that mean? So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about our reporting tool. So our reporting tool is something that we have had for about, it's kind of our second round of reporting. So we've been kind of working on it, creating it for about 2 years. And it really is a place to publicly report annual greenhouse gas emissions across different scopes, so operational emissions for your business, and then even beyond that into supply chain emissions, scope 3 emissions. But I'll get to how that works. It's also a place to put the climate actions taken to reduce emissions and the impact of emissions reduction plans. So really it's a kind of aim to be a simplified approach to reporting for small and medium-sized businesses that allows that data to be public and accessible by lots of different stakeholders. We've tried really hard to challenge ourselves to make sure we keep this reporting as simple as possible, and there's maybe 2 ways we've done that. So one is just to keep it to the needed data points. So we have mandatory questions within the reporting tool. So for example, operational emissions, scope 1 and 2 emissions are mandatory questions. We also have optional questions, non-mandatory questions. Now, some small businesses do fill that in, but it tends to be as they're getting more used to reporting, they feel more confident to do something like analyze their supply chain emissions, their scope 3 emissions, and begin to report on that. But those ones aren't needed to kind of fulfill the requirements of the tool. So we try very hard to make sure that we have a mandatory set of questions that are really the core of what everybody's really interested in, and then a next set that's almost like for businesses maturing in their reporting journey. We also put a big emphasis on flexibility. So we actually have 3 tools in one. We've got a micro version of our reporting tool for businesses with 1 to 10 employees that's aimed to be much simpler, taking out a lot of those additional questions in the non-mandatory sections and just really focusing in on the core metrics. We have a regular version, which was what I was describing. And then we also have a version that is a reporting upload version that allows a small business to put in an already existing report that covers a lot of the things in this reporting tool. So if you have a report already that covers all this information, you can just upload that report and then ask for we ask for a small set of 5 metrics just to make sure that we're kind of allowing ourselves to be comparable across all the different SMEs reporting. But basically, it's just a very simple upload function. And that's to save time and duplication. And so that's our reporting tool. But then I'm going to, and when we talk about our commitment, we have about just over 8,500 SMEs committed across 135 plus countries, with many more using our action tools. Our goal this year is to reach 10,000 commitments. I'm going to now hand over to Dan to discuss our action space a bit more. It's just launched this week, so it's really exciting, and it would be great to tell you a bit more about our action tools.
Wonderful. I'm hoping everyone can hear and see me, and it's great to see so many people on the call. Mark, if you could switch over to the next slide. Brilliant. So yes, we've really excitedly launched our new action space on the SME Climate Hub on Tuesday. So I'm going to set the scene a bit as to why we've done this, and then I'm just going to start sharing it and give you all a bit of a virtual tour through it. But what it is basically a new tailored space for our SME community that brings together all of our tools and resources in hopefully a much more easy and navigatable way, and giving a bit of a streamlined approach to the way we present the tools and resources. So we've had a number of resources and tools on the platform for a long time now, but they haven't always been easy to find, and we've always just keen to make sure that we present the information in a way that kind of helps SMEs along their journey. So that's where we've arrived at this. So it also brings together various internal but also external resources. So it's also given us an opportunity to work with external partners who have great tools, great resources, great guidance that we can also share with SMEs via our platform. And also take SMEs on a bit more of a modular approach when we present resources with them. Not just throwing a bunch of resources in one place, but rather kind of taking them on a bit of a journey regarding kind of the first set of resources perhaps they might want to look at if they're brand new to climate action, towards kind of once they're more ready, that kind of bottom level of the really complicated ones, not really complicated ones, but the more advanced actions. It also really allows us to deepen our understanding of SMEs' interests and needs and collect really valuable data on what kind of actions they're taking, what kind of resources are actually helpful, so we can carry on improving and building on the platform with time. So Mark, if you just go on to the next slide. So before sharing it all, I thought it'd be helpful to just quickly give a bit of an overview of the different tools types we have on the platform. We've got our carbon calculator, which assesses SME scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. It follows the greenhouse gas protocol. Extremely user-friendly tool, so we would definitely recommend using it, particularly if you're getting started and want to understand what your emissions are. We then have action guides. These are like really short, succinct, practical guides to help SMEs on a number of different actions, from kind of setting targets to engaging their employees on how they travel to the office, to reducing emissions via things like switching to renewable energy and so on. So they cover a wide range of different topics, and they're very helpful kind of 1 to 3 page PDFs that can really help you just get up to speed on a particular topic and begin taking action. We then have a number of different courses. So in particular, we have our Climate Fit course. These are interactive courses that, again, cover a number of different modules, from kind of setting up governance and strategy, addressing operational emissions, addressing supply chain emissions, engaging with your community, securing financing. And these kind of, so the whole course in itself kind of acts as a climate action 101. Each of the modules take around 20 to 30 minutes. You can take it as a whole, you can take them separately if you want to get into a particular topic in a particular area. Got a number of case studies and kind of knowledge checks throughout. So these are great interactive tools, and I definitely recommend using them. We're also now branching off into more sector specific courses. So we started this off with the film and TV industry, setting up a course on EVs and how they can transition to electric vehicles and utilize electric vehicles. And we're also now branching into the food and manufacturing sector, food and beverage manufacturing sector as well. And this is something we'll look to kind of increase over the coming years and add more and more sector specific courses. And again, they run similar to Climate Fit course in the sense they're interactive, about 30 to 40 minutes to take the current ones on there. But will obviously be adapted depending on the sector. Then we also have our financial support guide, which kind of explains the different financing options available to SMEs to fund their climate action learning journey. So I'm now going to share my screen. So I'm hoping everyone can see this. So this is our new action space, and I'll pop a link into the chat afterwards, so please feel free to have a play about with it. I should also say this is going to be continuously reviewed over the course of its lifetime. So we're always accepting feedback. We want to make sure that the resources in there are appropriate and helpful and that they're presented in the right way. So always happy to hear feedback. But how it works is we've put all of our resources and tools, including external ones, into different topics. So you can basically visit, if there's a particular topic you're interested in, you can go to that topic and see all the relevant resources and actions we have for that area. And we start off with our kind of 3 core ones. So these cover things like business basics, which is more about like getting started, measuring emissions, setting targets, what's the general process look like, kind of then finishing with reporting on your emissions and how you can access finance. Operational emissions, kind of what it says in the tin, identifying, addressing emissions from your operations, and then supply chain ones as well. So how you can engage with your supply chain to reduce your supply chain emissions. And then we have a number of more specific areas as well, ranging from renewables, from transport to buildings, finance, governance, all the likes. And this, again, is something we'll continue to look to build on in the future. So if I go into maybe operational emissions as an example, you can then see here we have our various different resources. So this here's what our Climate Fit course on operational emissions. We've got a couple of action guides here, and how we've split it is into 3 main categories, and some of the areas have less. But basically the idea being that we can kind of take the SMEs on a bit of a journey for this topic. So this first category always kind of focusing on understanding the basic principles and perhaps addressing some of the easier actions, some of the low-hanging fruit. And then moving on to kind of the next set of resources and actions, which are kind of for once an SME is maturing along their journey and are ready for kind of the next step, those next set of actions, once they've got a bit more of an understanding. And then finally, once an SME is kind of maybe feels like they've implemented, they've done the low-hanging fruit, they've got a really strong understanding of the area, they can begin leading and some more advanced steps they can take and the correlating resources to them. So, for example, this is the action guide on reducing emissions from business travel. If you select over it, you then get this view of the course. We're asking for ratings as well because we all want constant feedback. Gives you a bit of an indication as well on how long the course takes. We understand a lot of businesses are very time stretched. They might be looking for a quick a resource that's quick and easy, or they might have a bit more time, in which case they might want to invest a few more hours into it. But here you can access the resource, and it will take you through to our page. For this is our action guide on reducing emissions from business travel. So yeah, so that's operational emissions. Then, for example, business basics, similar situation. You have the 3 categories, different courses. Here we've got some of our great external talk calls. So, for example, this is from EDF's Net Zero Action Accelerator, and we've got the Exponential Roadmaps 1.5 Business Playbook. Again, that first part set on building an understanding before the second set around establishing goals. So things like setting a climate commitment, understanding targets, and then accelerating progress, which includes things like reporting, and securing financing for your transition. And yeah, so we hope it's fairly intuitive and easy to run through. You can see we've got lots of different categories as well. So we've got these more specific ones, such as renewables, which is all about how you can incorporate renewables in your business as well. And we've taken an approach where it's very curated view. So we're not just trying to spam any tools we can find. We want it to be easy to understand and not overwhelm businesses. So it's very curated. It's very intentional with the tools we're selecting. Hence, you're never going to find like dozens and dozens of tools on one area. We really hope it's curated and as helpful as possible. And then we've also embedded some case studies at the bottom that are specific to that area. So these are case studies we have on the SME Climate Hub. So examples of businesses, for example, in this case, that have embedded renewables into their business. So not only can you see the tools available to help you take action, but you can hopefully also dive into some of the case studies for businesses who have done the same and have started seeing benefits from it. So yeah, I think that's hopefully a helpful quick overview of the action space. Again, we'll put the link in the chat so you can have some time to play with it yourself. But yeah, I'm going to stop screen sharing, Mark, and hand back over to you to screen share, and we can carry on. Have I stopped screen sharing?
Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay. So I think we can bring the slides back up.
Yep, they're here.
Oh, sorry, I can't see them. Okay, excellent. So bear with me. So yeah, so we are as I mentioned for some reason I can't see the slides that are being shared, but I'm hoping we're on the moving on to slide 14, Mark, on the share your decarbonisation journey story. So we, as mentioned, we've got a number of different case studies throughout embedded on the SME Climate Hub from our SMEs who have begun their journey. So these are just a few of those examples here. So we have, for example, Frog Bikes. They are dedicated to creating sustainable bikes, particularly for children. So all electric vehicles, and they've used all sorts of recycled materials and kind of promote sustainable logistics in their operations. There's then Multi-Decor India. They produce high quality prefabricated steel buildings like office spaces and homes, and they've done a great job at installing solar panels and recycled wastewater and kind of various technologies throughout their businesses. And then there's Dr. Broners, and they produce clean and organic body products, and they've done a great job of building their supply chains, reducing plastic and their materials, and implementing waste collection. So these are just some examples, and we're always looking for more stories to share because it's great when we have SMEs come along and share the progress they've made. Speaking of which, I'm really happy to introduce Will from Forster Communication, who a great example of a business that has taken kind of climate action on their operations. So Will, would you like to briefly introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi Dan, really good to be here. Yeah, my name's Will. I'm Head of Operations and Impact at Forster Communications. We're a small but perfectly formed sustainability communications agency based in a single site in London.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And could you first perhaps start by telling us when Foster Communications started prioritizing climate action?
Yeah, so we were actually we were created as an agency in 1996. Our founder used to be the marketing director for the Body Shop, and she wanted to set up an agency that was kind of followed the same values that the Body Shop had around kind of saving the planet and helping to improve people's lives. So we've always kind of had impact as a kind of a major part of our story and our journey as a company. But actually we didn't kind of start focusing on kind of the climate and climate action until 2019, when we declared a climate emergency along with kind of We Mean Business and the B Corp community. So it's kind of from there that it's kind of started our journey on climate, really.
Brilliant. So that's 5 years or so. So it'd be great to know kind of what changes so far you've implemented to reduce emissions.
Yeah, no, it's great. So in 2019, as part of our kind of declaration of the climate emergency, we created a 3-year plan out of kind of that movement, which was it was kind of mapping our next 3 years of kind of moving forward with climate action. So we laid out kind of goals we had to hit. So the main goal was getting all of our supply chain to sign up to have net zero targets in place, which was a challenging thing. And we also kind of said that we had various other things in there as well. So that was kind of the main one for our reduction, but also because we're a small agency, and so our kind of scope 1 and 2 emissions are really negligible. So we kind of thought, as a small agency, actually the biggest thing we can do is look at our scope 3 emissions. So we concentrated on our supply chain, suppliers one way and then our clients the other way. So they've been the interesting things.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on it there. I mean, you mentioned it was particularly challenging around that supply chain piece. Do you want to go into a bit more detail on kind of any other issues or barriers you've kind of come across, and perhaps ways you've approached them and overcome them?
Yeah, of course. So I mean, with our supply chain, because we'd asked kind of our suppliers to do a very specific thing, and most of our suppliers are SMEs as well. So we had to work with them and encourage them to kind of make the changes that we wanted. The biggest barrier we came up with was with our CRM platform, who were kind of based in the States, and they point blank refused to engage in any kind of climate work at all. So kind of we were talking to them for about a year, and in the end, we'd spoken to their CEO, we'd spoken to kind of various people within their business, and that they just weren't willing to move. So we ended up stopping using them as a supplier, because it just, we'd made this commitment. So we ended up moving, which cost us quite a bit of money, because we'd had all the history of all our kind of contacts were in that one database. We had to then move it over, which was a bit of a pain. Other things we've done, so we started reporting on our commuting as part of our scope 3 emissions, and so we're kind of encouraging staff to then cycle or walk to work. So most of our employees kind of work within 15 miles probably of the office, so we've got about 50%, I think, of our staff now either walk or cycle into work. So it's just little things like that really help to kind of push you along a little bit, and it's a nice thing to do. We offer extra holiday for anyone who cycles, so it makes it worthwhile.
Oh my gosh, I'd be cycling in from miles away.
You have no idea how far people are doing.
What's the furthest someone cycled into work to get a bit to get
I'm embarrassed to admit that I cycle the furthest into work. So my round trip's 28 miles.
Oh, not bad, not bad, not bad. And I guess, are there any SME Climate Hub tools or resources that have helped you kind of on this journey? And I guess following on from that, are there any other outside the SME Climate Hub tools or resources perhaps that also helped?
Yeah. So I mean, from within the SME Climate Hub, kind of the main ones are the 1.5 degree business playbook. You know, the 4 pillars of climate action really kind of helped kind of us work out how we were going to move forward with it. You know, and they've got really good kind of suggested actions in there, and it really helps to kind of show you how to report against these things. I mean, we've always done a sustainability report, but it's kind of, that's been kind of a broader report than what we do now for kind of our impacts and on our climate. Also the climate fit things by Cambridge University. I mean, they're really great little sessions. It's kind of, they're bite-sized 30-minute guides, and you know, they just really help to kind of, they're easy to follow, and you know, they're nice and quick. I know you mentioned those before. Other kind of things we've used that are kind of outside it, the B Corp kind of climate playbook is obviously something we're aligned to. I mean, we're a B Corp as well, but kind of that really helped kind of move things along. And there was also Chapter Zero did a playbook as well, but I forget what it was called. But that was a really helpful resource. I'll try and dig it out. But that was a handy thing to have in place.
Brilliant. And I guess as a final question, what benefits have you seen to date kind of from taking this climate action?
I mean, it's been, there's been several. I mean, the cost side of it is obviously, I mean, there is a cost to kind of taking these actions, and for us, it's been worthwhile. But I mean, the main things actually are kind of on procurement for kind of businesses we're pitching for. So lots of the bigger companies and government agencies we're pitching for now, if you haven't got these things in place, you're almost at a disadvantage before you've even started the process. So having kind of climate action kind of aligned to your business, well, and your business strategy, more importantly, it really helps kind of with that procurement piece. So kind of, you know, if you're pitching against people who have already got that and you haven't, then you're at a disadvantage. And even just kind of getting your name out there, it's been really great to kind of come on things like this, for instance, and you know, speak to other like-minded businesses, especially as a B Corp. You know, we're all about kind of working with other kind of companies who share the same values as us, and so if people have taken that action, then it's much easier to take them as a supplier or look at them as a client. So you know, it's really, the business case for us is really strong. I mean, I think last year 75% of our income came from companies who are working in the climate space, so you know, it's a massive area at the moment.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for sharing your journey and how it's gone, and being very honest with the group. I'm going to hand back over to Lydia now to open up the conversation for questions from our audience, I think.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Dan and Will. I think that was really great for you to talk through some of the like honest decisions you've had to make in terms of suppliers and the consequences behind that. I think that really shows the sort of journey you have to go on as you take a climate commitment and actually make it into a reality of how you practice and do business. Thank you for sharing all those stories. And then we've had some really great questions in the chat. So let me get started because we've got a lot of questions, and I think there are some really tricky, interesting ones. So I think a lot of them are starting off as ones there's a few for me. So I'm going to start reading them out and giving you guys some answers. And everybody chip in if there are pieces that I miss or you want to bring in. So the first one through the chat was, SBTi also has a standard for SMEs. Which one should we follow? And then also asking about what about ESG ratings, and how do disclosures done through the SME Climate Hub help? So let me take the commitment part first. Yes, we have the SME Climate Hub commitment, but SBTi also has their own SME track commitment. So maybe two things. The first one is that the commitments are a little different through the SME Climate Hub and SBTi. The SME Climate Hub one is a kind of free commitment that you can get started on quite quickly. The SBTi commitment, I would say, takes a more work before you get to the place where you be able to make that commitment, and is a paid for commitment. So you have to put a bit of money into getting it reviewed through SBTi. So that's maybe what I think is one of the biggest differentiators as a getting started place. We're currently talking to SBTi quite a lot about this question, because we see a pocket of small businesses that tend to come to us at the SME Climate Hub and make our commitment. We see a pocket of more medium-sized businesses that tend to come to SBTi and make the commitment through SBTi. And what we're trying to do is create a few more rules, exactly as an answer to this question of when is it the right route for businesses to make the commitment through the SME Climate Hub, and when is the right route to make the commitment through SBTi. I would say that because our commitment is kind of a free commitment and an easy way to get started, there's no reason you couldn't make both commitments too. I think for me, the SBTi commitment for SMEs is one for larger SMEs that are in corporate supply chains. That's sort of where we begin to see a kind of pool of SMEs making that commitment. But we're hoping to make a more agreed final decision on that between us and SBTi, so we can make it really clear about where you should go in which circumstance. Then the question about ratings. So there are lots of ESG ratings out there. Some would count a commitment like ours as a tick that you've done it. Some might not. It would depend very much on the ratings. There are a lot of them out there. We try and work with some of the kind of larger rating agencies to make sure that our commitment is recognized as part of those. But because it's a really great net zero commitment aligned with 1.5, I think it is reasonable that it's recognized in those sorts of ESG ratings. We also sometimes get emails from our SMEs asking us when they don't feel like something's recognized appropriately through ESG ratings or other platforms like EcoVadis. So if there's ever a case where you don't feel like it's recognized, drop us an email, because we can sometimes then go and talk to them behind the scenes and get a bit of a discussion going on why it's not recognized. So it's always great to let us know anywhere where you feel like it's not working the way you'd want it to. Hopefully that answers that question. The next question was one that's about the reporting and the commitment and how they link. So I'm confused about having to meet a 50% reduction by 2030 and net zero by 2050, but then you say reporting on scope 3 is optional. I agree, that is maybe a little confusing. So when we talk about reporting on scope 3 being non-mandatory, the reason we've positioned it that way is because it's sometimes a big barrier to overcome for SMEs just getting started on reporting. I think as any SME matures in their reporting journey, scope 3 is going to become increasingly important, because when you start measuring it, you'll start seeing that actually it makes up a great part of your emissions and a great part of where some of the actions that you need to take happen. Not for every business, but for a lot of businesses, that's the journey that you go on. Putting it into mandatory at the very start of reporting can sometimes be a bit off-putting though. So that's why we've positioned it like that in terms of reporting. In terms of the commitment for the halving by 2030, what we say, and do jump in if people have the better language on this, but what we say is basically it should be halving your scope 1 and 2 emissions by 2030 and as much of your scope 3 emissions as you can bring in there. But we are not necessarily expecting an SME to have a full set of their scope 3 emissions and halve them all by 2030, because in some places that might not be possible just because the calculators aren't good enough yet. I do think there are really good routes though. We have a free carbon calculator as part of our offering. It would allow you to get scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 supply chain emissions, which I think is a really great starting point. So we try to be just a little bit more relaxed on scope 3 at the very start, so it's not too off-putting, but I think for me, it really needs to be part of the analysis and the journey. Hopefully that answers that question. I know it's not the simplest answer, but I think that it can take more than a year to get to grips with your scope 3 emissions and what value chain emissions are. Okay, and now we have quite a specific question. So we are involved in a forthcoming NHS tender here in the UK. A prerequisite is to have a compliant CRP. Our current, which I think would be a carbon reduction plan. Our current soon to be updated plan has been generated using your reporting tool. Can I assume this is compliant based on the NHS definition? So I would say that I think our reporting tool would cover a lot of the things that you would find in a typical carbon reduction plan. I don't know if it's exactly aligned with the NHS one and definition. I think that is probably worth checking because unfortunately there isn't a absolutely smooth alignment between different requirements for carbon reduction plans and different requirements for reporting. It's actually something we work a lot on behind the scenes of trying to encourage all the different players to begin to align this so that it's not overburdening to small businesses trying to be in different supply chains and talk to different customers and different governments and having to report in different ways. So it's something we do quite a lot of work on in the background, So I would suggest that it's worth checking if it completely aligns. There might be 1 or 2 things that you would need to add because sometimes they have specific extra pieces that they would want, but the core of what we ask for in our reporting tool is the core of what they'd ask for in a carbon reduction plan. So I think that it would more be a case of adding a couple pieces to it rather than having to rewrite it. Okay, and another question is, I'm interested to hear your response for companies that have say 50 to 60% of emissions from freight and are hesitant to commit and publicly announce targets when it's not clear how or if the transport sector will reduce their emissions. These companies may not be able to meet their targets. So I totally agree that sometimes there are some things within a small business's control, any business's control, but particularly I think small and medium-sized businesses, there are some things within your control and some things not so within your control. So in this case, I think I would encourage, if freight is that much of your supply chain and your supply chain emissions and your business emissions, I think I would encourage you to first start learning about it and to start thinking about what tactics you could take to decarbonize that freight and if they're available to you yet. So for example, start reading, which I'm sure you may have already, some of our action guides, some of our courses, start thinking about the options and start talking to your suppliers about it. Then I suppose it's a bit of a business judgment call about whether you would then take the commitment and make an assumption that this sector will decarbonize and that you will work with suppliers who are working on that decarbonisation journey, or if you want to sit in that action space for a bit longer and watch what they're doing. I think Will's example of changing a supplier, so working with a key supplier for a while to try and convince them that this is important to you as a business and as a customer, and working with them for a while until the point where you decide, actually, this supplier, this big freight company that we worked with isn't going to go down this route, but we have alternatives who might be trying to decarbonize faster. You might also choose to change suppliers at that point. So I think I would suggest at that point you do learning, and then take the approach that works for your business. That could be sitting in the action space for a little bit longer and kind of working on it as a topic, but not feeling comfortable to commit yet. Some businesses don't mind making a commitment that they sort of see as something to shoot for and something to try for. So it depends a bit on the business makeup. We see both often, ones who like to have all the answers before they commit, and ones who like to commit and then figure out the answers. So I'd say sit in the place that you're comfortable for that one. Okay, now just looking at what other questions we have coming through. So, Will, I've got a question for you. So Lisa Settle at Ryland Communications asked, my suppliers won't answer my emails asking them to join us in climate action. To change so many suppliers would cause so much disruption to our small team. Any advice?
I have got a bit of advice on that one, actually. So, I mean, we are a little bit bigger than you, but not much. I mean, the way we managed it, it was kind of twofold, really. We kind of used a little bit of the stick and carrot. So it's kind of cajoling people and chasing them a little bit. Another thing we did, which actually was the most helpful in this, was so we created a supplier screening questionnaire, which we sent around to all our suppliers saying, we need you to fill this in. And it's kind of, we then kind of in the introduction email to the screening plan, we laid out why we were sending the screening document and kind of what we were going to do with the data. But actually, because then you're outlining why you're kind of asking them for the information, it actually, like, it was I think is 8 questions long, and the average answer time's 5 minutes, but it actually gives you much more information, because you can say, you know, are you doing anything to take climate action? Do you measure your emissions? And you actually get quite a good view on whether they're actually doing anything in the space, because it might be that they're just very busy and they don't want to answer it, but they are actually doing those things. But you know, just having a reason to get in touch with them and saying, you know, really sorry, we need this, you know, it's a new company policy and this is why we're doing it. That had a much better level of engagement than just sending. If you just send an email, people don't have to do anything with it. But if you send them something within the email with a description of why you're collecting that information, you get a lot better kind of feedback from people.
Amazing. Thank you, Will. That was really helpful.
I hope it's helpful.
Well, there aren't always perfect answers as well. Like I think it's part of the learning curve, right, of how you do this.
It is, and you know, at the end of the day, you know, we had to get rid of a couple of suppliers along the way, and you know, we even looked at our banking and got rid of one of our banks because they weren't aligned to kind of our climate action, and you know, that was a pain because they're a big high street bank with a really nice website that works. But you know, it's one of those things, you've got to stick with your values, and you know, that's really important to us.
Brilliant. Thanks, Will. Okay, more questions. We're getting so many really great questions today. Thank you, everyone. I think this is super smart questions coming through. So So the next question is regarding the carbon calculator. How do you measure or report reductions in Scope 3 emissions using a spend-based calculator like the one from Normative? Our largest Scope 3 emissions. Okay, I'm gonna. There's two questions, I think, so I'm gonna deal with that one first. So this is I think a very insightful question. So I would say that if you are using a carbon calculator, like most carbon calculators that are available to SMEs, our business carbon calculator, and a lot of other of the paid for calculators, they will be basing, so they should be basing Scope 1 and 2 on real data, you know, your energy bills, what you're actually buying and using. But for Scope 3 data, it's based on spend. So it's based on how much of a certain thing, computers, cotton, whatever it is that you buy, and then timesing that up by an emission factor. I agree that, so for that, I would say that is much more of a hotspotting tool. What you're getting is a really good snapshot, or model is probably the best word to use, of your Scope 3 emissions, where the big emission pots lie, and it can then lead you to what actions you need to take. Taking those actions won't necessarily bring that Scope 3 down in those calculators year on year, because that's not how they work. They're based on global emission factors. You could say change, change your computers from a much less efficient to a more efficient one. You could do all sorts of things that wouldn't be reflected in those global emission factors. So I think it's the Scope 3 in those calculators is very useful as a hotspotting tool. It's very useful in giving you an idea of where you should be looking, but it is not so useful at the moment for tracking the downward trajectory of the actions you're taking. It's something that SBTi is currently looking at, and it may come through in their new standard revision. It's something that I think we want to spend more time on next year, because really, after you've done that Scope 3 hotspotting analysis, it makes a lot more sense to go down one of two routes. One is identifying areas to take action, and then finding the right way to track that action. Something like business travel, the calculations do work. For something like the products and services you're buying through your procurement, you may need a different way of metricing how you're improving on that over time. It's not necessarily going to come through those Scope 3 figures. The other thing that the larger companies are doing are going to their suppliers and trying to get actual emission factors from their suppliers that then show the changes. But I think that's quite a complex, difficult thing, and they're still grappling with it. So personally, I think it's about taking that Scope 3 hotspotting and then getting very, very practical and tactical about then how you're tracking what activities you're taking against that. Okay, that's a Scope 3 calculation question. And I think the other question around the calculator was, if our largest Scope 3 emissions are with suppliers who have made a climate commitment, do you have guidance or tools to help us determine whether or how to reflect/exclude from our carbon footprint or calculations? So this kind of links into the last question. I think it is really important to align, if you can, your suppliers. So, you know, saying, okay, we have our 20 suppliers, 100 suppliers, and they have, you know, these ones are really important to our business. They're very high emitting, they're very tactical suppliers. These ones have made a climate commitment too and are on the journey too. That's very important. You can't then uncount them from your emissions, but it does mean that as all this measurement improves, as all of this progresses, you'll be able to see some of the benefits from having those type of suppliers. But we have a different way of metricing that in the reporting tool. So we actually ask that question directly because we think it's a really important metric, but it doesn't then link into your emissions. It's more like an additional metric that shows that you're aligning your supply chain in the right direction. Okay. Okay, now looking, we've got loads of questions. And I think maybe this is the last, we have time for one last question. So before handing it back. So the last question is, one challenge we have had is that we are a small, less than 25 people company that is fully remote, and our team is based in 10 countries. We calculate manually, as most calculators use country-specific data to estimate the calculations, but I wonder if anyone else is having this challenge and how you overcome it. I think this is a really interesting question. I'm not sure I have time to fully answer it, but I think that we've had a couple questions like this in the chat about the challenge of having a fully remote or home working team and how you count that towards your baseline, how you do work that into your emissions. So I think I would like us to take that away as an action of something to make sure that we, I think we talk about it now in some of our kind of general guides, but I think we should take that away as an action to see how we can work that in more deeply into our action space, because it's maybe a place where we could have pull in some guidance for you and also maybe create our own tool or guide around that. So let us take that away as a bit of a challenge. And I think that's probably all the questions that we have time for. Hopefully that has answered some of your questions. I know we have more, but I think we had such brilliant questions on this webinar, really smart and insightful. So thank you so much. And I'll hand back over to Pamela.
Thank you, Lydia. And I couldn't agree more. Some excellent questions. Thank you for being so active and proactive on this call, everyone. So we're at time. We're going to have to close the webinar, but thank you so much for joining us today. We'll be sending a follow-up email with a recording. We'll see if there's a way for us also to address some of the unanswered questions. We'll take all of this internally. And in the meantime, of course, I would encourage you to visit the action space, the website, the SME Climate Hub as a whole, see if you feel comfortable enough to make a commitment on the hub if you haven't already. And of course, do have a look at our tools to see how they can help you meet your target. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us today. And I hope we'll be in touch through the platform or, on other occasions very soon. Have a nice day.